There is no doubt that Sky News hate climate. Any conversation in relation to climate change, blah, 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 they get a little bit upset about it because at the end of the day, they don't believe that climate change exists and that they want to push that agenda to the nth degree. No matter what happens across the country, they will try and find a reason to justify why this is happening at all and to blame somebody else for it. And as a result of that, you often find their news articles they're exasperating, but they're also talking about their particular ideas in relation to the economy, climate change, politics, Albanese. So whatever sits on the right of politics, we notice the Murdoch press and others pushing those points. I'll be talking a little bit at some point later on about Albanese's trips overseas and how the Sky News are responding to all of that and some of the crazy things that they say and some of their most illogical, I think, reasons for presenting a justifiable opinion from their perspective. Most of them are false. All of them are false, or all of them at least. That's not true. All of them at least tainted with some version of falsity, but there might be elements and sort of elements of truth. And I've got an example of that. So Peter Credlin was on the other night talking about climate change, and she kind of started by saying that she had some sort of positive attitudes in relation to climate change and how what is happening now in Australia in terms of the floods in New South Wales. And I was thinking for a moment, oh my God, the woman's changed. She's developed a sense of humanity, and it was great to see. Except whenever I look at her, the woman, and I always forget her name, DeVille, that was in 101 Dalmatians. I always see her in this. She wears this black outfit, and the way her hair is cut, she looks evil. So anyway, that's how I see Credlin. Sure, underneath it all, she's a lovely person. However, I just want to play a snippet of a conversation that she had with the camera about climate, and I'll make some comments as we kind of peruse some of these things that she talks about. And if you've got a comment, please put it down below. If you'd like to subscribe to our channel and hear more about some of the bizarre, crazy, stupid things that I have to say, please subscribe and ring the bell as well, because it would be fabulous. It'd be fabulous to hear from you. So please do so. But I'll just go to the clip that I've got that talks about that. So it's about 5 minutes. I'll play probably most of it because it's at the end that Credlin starts diverging and placing some statistics before us, which I think I think that they're relatively challenging. So let's see what pearls of wisdom she has to offer.
Large parts of the Sydney Basin still underwater. Volunteers and communities, of course, pulling together to help those who are suffering with their lives and often businesses turned upside down yet again. It's a real worry that this is the third or fourth time for so many in just 2 years. Flood cleanups are a heartbreaking business, especially when the last one was just a few months back, and especially when insurance...
I think we need to focus on the fact here that Credlin basically is saying that she acknowledges that there's been a number of these in the last few years. Now, I want you to keep that in mind so that when we get to the end of her clip, we'll sort of question about her logic in terms of the graphs that she wishes to present.
Can't be taken for granted. At least with the new federal government in place, responsibility for this flood isn't being pinned on the government itself. As we saw with Scott Morrison, he was criticised for allegedly not doing enough to tackle climate change. Remember back in March with the floods, particularly severe around Lismore in northern New South Wales, they were all blamed on the Prime Minister. Scott Morrison's only got himself to blame, said Adam banned from the Greens. He's the one who's made the terrible decisions. He's fast-tracked the climate crisis. He has refused to come and talk to locals about the floods that he helped cause. And then this.
Liberal and Labor haven't just given up, they are aiding the enemy by backing more coal and gas. I don't know how Liberal and Labor can look at towns like Cobargo, Mallacoota, Lismore or Ballina in the eye and tell them that opening a new...
And I think that this argument's important to understand, because what Adam Brand is saying is that as long as we're investing in fossil fuels, then there will always be a climate issue and a climate problem. And of course, that's his concern. So he's looking at it as in a more macro way, whereas what Credlin wants to do is look at it in a micro way. And the two don't match, because Brandt's talking about it as a climate crisis, which is affecting all of us and which affects the world generally, whereas she wants to bring it down to just the issue in relation to the flooding that's currently happening. So I think there's a great disconnect between these two positions.
Gas mine is a good idea. They have blood on their hands. They have the blood of the people who are trapped in their flooded homes.
As if opening or closing coal mines and cutting emissions by 28%
Here we go.
43% is going to make any difference. Back in March...
Oh, it might. It might make some
Minister
difference.
Scott Morrison faced climate change protesters, even though Australia's record in cutting
This is
emissions
defending
has actually
Scott
been better
Morrison.
than many countries in the world, including Canada and New Zealand. But there was nothing like this today in Western Sydney for the new Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese. And he readily conceded this.
We know that Australia has always suffered from natural events, be they floods or bushfires.
I do have to say, I love the way she said he conceded this, like he gave in. I think this has always been a position that is taken, and it's a reasonable position to take, yet somehow he has conceded.
We can't say that every single event is because of climate change.
Amazing what the difference an election campaign makes in a change of leadership.
Yeah, it is amazing what difference it makes. Credlin, it's about the most sensible thing you've probably said for some time. It's a reasonable, respectful, rational individual now in control, as opposed to the jerk that we had before, your mate, and the rest of your mates in the Liberal Party.
But he didn't altogether abandon his green left religion.
If we continued to not take action globally on climate change, then these events...
Can I just say, notice the language, the grand left religion, like it's a fervour they have, which is the similarity, I guess, is to a religious fervour, but they don't, it's like the right don't have any fervours. They don't have things that they see that are extremely important to them, where they don't have that religious fervour. They do, they have lots of them, heaps of them in fact, probably more so I think than what the left do, but nevertheless it's according to Credlin, it's a religious fervour.
Extreme weather events would be more often and more intense, and what we're seeing unfortunately is that play out.
Okay, well, let's look at the historical record, which in Windsor goes back to 1799. The Windsor flood peak...
Now, this is where you can argue with me if you like, because I think that this is where Credlin stuffs up. Now, I'm not I don't think I'm the most logical person on earth. My life is governed very much by emotions and stuff, so perhaps I missed the logic, and if I have, then please let me know. Subscribe to my page and or place a comment either way, and just let me know what you think. But I think that it's not all that sensible.
March last year was 12.9 metres. In March this year, the peak was 13.8 metres. And in this current flood, it's 13.9 metres. These have all been very destructive floods, no doubt about that. Especially
So to her credit, during this period, this very brief period, she's highlighted 3 stages whereby the size of the flood has increased. And of course that sets her up now to make the following argument.
especially given the massive development now in Western Sydney in the 30 years since the last significant flood in 1992, which peaked then at just 11.1 metres. However, between 1809 and 1978, on no fewer than 10 occasions, floods at Windsor peaked at over 14 metres. The 1978 flood peaked half a metre higher than the current one.
So here she's arguing that over time, as you can see by this graph, there was a higher in 1867, which was just a few years ago, let's be honest. There weren't any major dams at that particular, well, there wouldn't have been any at all, really, I don't think, at that particular point. There wasn't any ways by which we could cut down on the flow of water back in 1867. And then we've had these 1961, 1964, and 1978, we've had at 14.4. Now, I don't know if you can actually see the illogical logic around what she's saying, but let me know if you can.
In 1816 and 1817, there were 2 floods within 7 months that peaked higher than any of the 3 floods we've just had in the past 15 months. And the daddy of all floods happened way back in 1867, peaking then at 19.7 metres, or almost 6 metres higher than current floods. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not for a moment minimising the destruction.
I'll get you wrong at the first possible opportunity, and this is one of them.
These current floods, all the pain that so many are experiencing right now, tonight, across the Sydney Basin. It's just that it's hard to say that it's all down to climate change, given that the worst floods happened more than 150 years ago.
Now, this is where I'm just going to leave it at this because she's a pain in the ass. But this is where I think is the primary argument. So she's arguing that because there was more of something 150 years ago, that for some reason there is no climate change. You know, that's like saying, well, you know, we had, you know, 1 million years ago we had an ice age, so that wasn't about climate change either, I guess, because there weren't all that many humans there and it wasn't man-made. It came from there are other reasons for that, I guess. So, you know, therefore there's no climate change. Well, her argument falls apart, I think, when we look at the regularity now that's occurring around climate events, extreme climate events. There are more of them. They're clearly happening more often and they're more severe. So to look back and say just because at a certain period in history the rate of the rivers were higher, there is a non-argument because it's not comparing apples with apples. It's comparing them with something else. So we need to be wary of what it is that the right wing tries to tell us that we know are inaccurate, that are simply untruths, that are trying to mount their argument to support their view of the world. So I'd be interested to know what you might think about that, and if you would also like to subscribe, please do so. But what do you think? Am I logical? Am I just as crazy as Credlin, or what? And I'll have a discussion with you about it. And if you've got topics that you'd like to talk about, that you'd like me to talk about, that you think might be of interest, please let me know as well. Take care, look after yourselves, and more importantly, everybody, be safe.